So I thought we'd just hang out for the next little bit. I've got Alias running, and we can focus on asking questions or going through any of the tools, workflows, and things. I really don't have anything specific to show. I was just going to kind of mess around for the next little bit. So loud and clear, love it, excellent. Welcome, welcome. So how are you guys doing? Hope everyone's doing well. Are you practicing using Alias or working professionally at home or at a studio if you're that lucky? Would love to know. Yes, this will be available later on as a video on my channel. Just see if I can pull this in. Kind of start some. Not sure if this is going to work. I remember having some trouble here. I was going to start with just pulling in some OBJ files or sub-D files, not OBJ. So do we have any questions or things you would like to see? That's strange. Yeah, 2021. That's going to be great to see, but I don't believe it's out yet. Good question. Yeah, I have had... Yeah, we've been talking. I've talked to Autodesk about it, and yeah, really exciting. Obviously, I can't say anything specific, but yeah, 2021, we're looking forward to that in the next couple months. Excellent. I see students working from home. Great. Good chance to practice and make the most out of the time. I'm on another screen right now. We're trying to get a file in. I had saved, let me just see if I can launch Modo here. I've been working a lot in the sub-D tool set, and yeah, the sub-D tools inside of Alias are really exciting. The things that you can do combining both NURBS and sub-Ds is awesome, is absolutely amazing. Just figure out if I can find or grab one of these files to show you guys. Have you guys tried the sub-D workflows in Alias, or are you mainly focused on NURBS? Alias and VRED. All right. Great combination. Are any of you guys using Keyshot? VRED is always great integration with Alias, but man, Keyshot, they've really done some cool stuff lately. You get to see my absolutely disaster of a file organization in this file. It's a race car I'm working on inside of Modo, and it's all sub-Ds, and you can bring this in to Alias, which is pretty cool. Let me just grab this. Grab a new file. Paste it in. Make sure I have the right one. And I'll export selected. Subdivision tricks. Yeah, I can show a few for sure. Well, first of all, I'm inside of Modo, and this works the same with Maya or Cinema 3D, Blender. I'm sure OBJ is what we want, so we'll go to the OBJ. I believe I And yeah, let me just grab this folder, export, sub D test, and your shell. A little bit of subdivisions, still a lot to learn. Yeah, that is true. It's very different from your typical Alias workflow. So the big thing, if you're bringing in data from other applications, when you import, you want to import subdiv, specifically subdiv, and subd test. Let me just drag this in. Wow, it looks like our scale is a little bit off from Modo and Alias. No big deal. Just turn this off. So this is the import from Modo, and if we go to box modeling mode, you can see, it's really fast, because when you import this data, really what you're importing is all of the points of the cage, right? And so when Alias then smooths or generates the limit surfaces, it's generating that on the fly. So you get all the perks of whatever sub-D work you've done in other applications, and you can bring it into Alias. Let's get this scaled. Something to point out, I always like to show people this. If you look into the prompt line for scaling of an object, this looks very small from what it should be. And when you scale, you have the choice of absolute, so I can just type A, switch it to absolute, or R to be relative. If you set it to absolute, you're basically scaling to a dimension, like 100 millimeters. If you had built something at the default size and you scale it to 1,000, it'll be 1,000 millimeters in my case. But if I switch it to relative, then it's a multiplier. It's like a percentage. So if I need to scale this, I'm just going to type in 10, and then it will do 10 times what the original. So it's a relative to the original one. So let's go ahead, and I think it would probably be closer to 100 or 1,000. And that looks a little better. So then we'll just rotate into position. So that should be X. And relative, sure. There we go. So this is a sub D. Let me just change the quality here to make sure. Yeah, that's should be a little better. I think the quality for these settings were pretty low. So this is a sub D model, and you can see, yeah, I mean, the quality is awesome. It is coming from Modo, but we can make some changes. And from choosing the cage, if we go to box modeling mode, you can choose the points. It's control vertices, just like anything else. And you can grab an entire row. Let me switch to my shelf for all my sub D tools. And I'll just select a loop just to show you guys this. And if you're selecting a loop in box model, it will choose the whole row, everything that's kind of a chain of the edges. And then when you go to smooth modeling, you can see how that's reflected into a smooth mesh underneath. And what's unique about Alias with sub-Ds is these are actual surfaces. They're NURBS surfaces. And that's very unique. All the other applications that I'm aware of, the limit surface is represented in polygons, where this is NURBS. So let's just undo a few of these settings. And for example, one of the benefits of that would be, let's just say we want to take I want to punch a hole into this. And if I'm doing this in standard sub-Ds, when I trim, basically you're going to modify the topology of this area. Here I can just grab, I'll just project, and this could be surfaces or curves, whatever it is. And let's not project real curves. There's a curve on surface, and I'll just go to my standard trim. And now I've got basically a NURBS trim inside of my sub-D. And then if I go to just your normal NURBS tools, let's say I grab draft, and let me just switch this to chain. And draft, whoops. Yeah, and we'll just go in Z. And so now that's a NURBS, a standard NURBS draft surface off of a sub D, and now I can do things like filleting. Let's just grab those guys. Oops. Grab this portion, and what do we have? Radius, tangent. Yeah, let's, I'm not sure how large that will be. Yeah. So now I've got a precise NURBS fillet between a standard NURBS patch and a sub D patch, with history and everything. And so if you've ever worked with sub Ds in the past, if you wanted to make a fillet like here along these edges, I'm basically just moving these points closer to the corner, right? So if I just go into my standard, slide, and I move this closer, oh, whoops, helps if I turn my sensitivity down. That's how you make a sharper corner or a softer corner. Whereas inside of Alias, if I need a 5 mil radius, as in this case, I can just add it. I can use my surface filleting tools. And another kind of situation I could do is we'll just select that whole row. I'll crease this. And so, now it's a hard edge. And so if I knew from an engineering standpoint or from a design that I want a 5 mil surface, fillet onto that piece, now I'm coming in and it's a crease, it's a hard edge, and I can just grab my surface fillet tool. And we won't do everything, but I'll just do a couple of these. And I can add that fillet. We'll just do edge align through that. See if edge align fixes this little double right there. And now we have a true, what is this? Radius tangent. We could set this curvature, whatever we want through that area. So you get pretty much the best of everything inside of Alias with the sub D. So yeah, we could go through as much as you would like in this. I've been playing with it a lot, and I can show you all sorts of things. Let's remove this. There are some limitations on the history. This should work pretty good just because I'm projecting in Z. So let go. Let me hide that stuff. Yeah, you can see that it had to rebuild the order, so we lost our fillet history. So there are some limitations with that. And let me just switch my performance options to during transform and see if my computer's strong enough to run all of this at the same time. Yeah, that looks cool. So now I'm modifying the sub D. The draft is updating as well as the surface fillet. So that's pretty dope. That's really cool. And to build this, circle shape in a normal sub D, like I said, you'd have to change the topology in order to get that to really read as a true circle. And even then, because it's always blending, you may not get a perfect 360. There might be a little, some waviness in the circle, to say the least. So that's kind of how that would work. If we want to, let's just kind of mess around with this. Oops, I don't have my hotkeys set up for that. Grab those, and the basics are, you're basically always extruding, dividing, or beveling. Those are the main tools, I would say. And you can switch between global or normals. So we want global, and we'll just pull this piece down. And, disregard this softness up here. We can always go in and, here, let's go back to box modeling mode. And let's say I wanted to create a sharp corner. I could either intersect. Oops, let me switch this. I'll go perpendicular. So there I can intersect. So perpendicular is closer to like Maya and Modo, how you would insert. And parallel is closer to Alias, where you drag the edge that you want to intersect along or insert along. And now when I go back to the smooth shading, you can see that's a lot stronger of a crease, or there's no crease, it's a stronger radius through there. And yeah, but that's, a lot of times I'll wait till the end. I model in box model mode a lot, like in this mode. Make all my adjustments and then add details after the fact, after I know that it's really close to what I want. So cool. Let me catch up a little bit on the chat. Oh yeah, I would love to do these live every single day. Problem is I'm camped out at my brother-in-law's house in the basement. You know, usually I live in New York City, and well, that's a hot spot. So we left, and yeah, the kids and everything makes it a little tough to stream. So, but I would love to. That's great. Thanks for the feedback. I'll see what I can do. Still love SpeedForm. Oh, SpeedForm. Yeah, SpeedForm is a slightly different technology and approach. I believe that's built off of T-splines. But, you know, you can see where Autodesk is heading with a lot of these tools. You know, really giving you flexibility for both, you know, concept and you know, very precise NURBS modeling. So, yeah, SpeedForm is a really good product. Yeah, Blender for rendering. Yep. Does Blender have GPU rendering? Who mentioned that? Is that Aiden? Is there GPU rendering yet inside of Blender? Yeah, it seems where the market's really headed with a lot of those of the new tools. So. Just going to delete these guys over here. We don't need those. Just grab the points. Delete. I missed a few. One other feature, just show real quick. I just noticed that. Let's hide all this stuff. We don't need the grids, and we don't need lights. I'm gonna grab all these CVs. Missed one. All right. Why is that taking so long? So I'm going to take the model, and I want this to be symmetrical. And just to let you know, a lot of times I model in sub Ds, I model, let's just add a new layer. I only model half the car. And you know, if you use symmetrical modeling, well, here, let's fix this. I'm going to delete all of this stuff over here. It's actually rotated in the wrong direction. There we go. So if you use symmetric modeling, and when you're in, let's say, smooth shading, you could see kind of that, you know, areas are broken and there'll be a crease down the center of your object. And so, you know, symmetry in the layer doesn't work as well with pure NURBS. You really have to manage your center line. But if you do want to create the geometry over here and, you know, merge them all together and create a symmetrical model, I'll just say create geometry. So that just converted the symmetry to real geometry. I'm going to go to welding. I'm going to weld, and there's several options inside a weld. If I say to target, you know, that would be, you know, let's say from one side to another side, and it will snap those two together. And when you have a model like this, you have to do more than 2 points. Because Alias doesn't allow, I believe it's called non-manifold geometry, so I couldn't weld just 1 point. Midpoint, I saw there was a little issue here. Well, we'll fix that here in a little bit. But for something like the center line, you'll just want to use tolerance, right? And then you can bounding box over everything, and anything that's within that tolerance will automatically get welded to its neighbor. So that's the easiest, the best way. And it looks like there is a gap here. So let's just do midpoint. See if that works. Get that. Huh. Are these not? Oh, what's this guy? Oh, there's something funky going on here. Looks like I was a little sloppy in my modeling, but yeah, let's just weld these. Let's see if these can weld. Tolerance. Said you want to do more than one. Ah, there we go. Now it's something in here is a little strange. I would have to kind of dissect that. We can always take the time to do that. Let's get those. The modeler still use Maya. Oh, hold on, let me catch up. Dynamo. That was another question earlier. Dynamo is amazing, and I have to be careful what I say. I've seen some really cool stuff with, let's see, where would it be? Dynamo sample files and a Dynamo resources. Keep an eye on these two items here. I know there's been some stuff in the works that people have been building inside of Dynamo, and when I saw it, I literally fell off my chair. It is shortcutting some of the, it's not using Dynamo necessarily to create patterns and stuff, but to create rigs to build objects quickly, if that makes sense. So the Dynamo integration is continuing to be pushed, and I really need to take the time to learn that, because it's coming. You know, there's going to be some really cool stuff, so keep an eye out for that. Yeah, modelers still use Maya for sure, definitely. Let me just see what's happening here. I'm just going to delete these guys because there's something going on that's not what we want. So we'll just use the bridge command, something like that. And then I'll grab this side and we'll hit bridge, and then we'll want to add in a division, which gives us our center line. And then because we, this was two separate pieces, we will want to bridge that. And I'm noticing I had creased this before, so let's just go ahead and uncrease it so we can really see what's going on. Okay, so that area in the middle is now fixed. And now that that's fixed, I can use symmetrical modeling, pick the whole sub D, and yeah, now any point that I pick on one side will get selected on the other side. So that's awesome. That while you're modeling, you can see both sides, and because it's sub Ds, it works really well. Let me just untrim this stuff. Yeah. Symmetrical align works in sub D faces, I believe. That is true. Yeah, so I use the symmetrical modeling, but if we were to look at, well, here, let me use the palette, go away. Symmetric align, symmetry plane align, or symmetric modeling. They both work. Symmetry plane align will actually, let's see, we'll just take a box. I'll drop that right in the middle. Let's go ahead and increase some divisions. Actually, we probably don't need that many. Cool. Let's add one more. All right, so I'll just grab some of these points to make this fast, not those points. All right, so we'll pull those down, and yeah, why not? We'll pull all of them down, and we'll just delete these. And then I'll grab this face. I'll delete that so it's open. And if I go to symmetry align, it's going to, what you're doing is you're aligning this cage. Oh. Well, that's weird. Oh, wrong edge. So there we go. Oh, wasn't thinking. So we want to align this portion of the cage. So you're actually aligning the cage which drives the geometry on the inside, and the geometry on the inside is all curvature always, so we get the natural alignment here. But you will get what I consider a flat spot if you were modeling like this and you had this assigned to a symmetrical a symmetrical layer. Because the cage, you don't have to have a cage like that to be symmetrical inside of sub Ds. So that is just something to be aware of. You get two different shapes aligning it this way as opposed to having a full model go across the center line. I hope that makes sense. So, but yeah, good pointing that out. Who was that? Yeah, Joe Mama. Hey, welcome back. Good to see you. Cool, you use Grasshopper as well. Man, Grasshopper's very powerful. Very powerful. So, any other questions, or if you want me to continue with some sub D items, we can. Although I'm surprised I haven't set up marking menus for my sub D in this version, so, or on this laptop. You guys like to see anything else specific? I don't know if there's a lag between what you're seeing on the screen and the chat line, chat room, or whatever this is called, live chat. So let's go ahead and go to scale. Something, another feature, just point this out. Actually, I don't think it works on components, but scaling. Let's grab all of these. Inside of Alias, I don't need this object anymore. Usually we would just snap for these types of objects. You'll start seeing a lot more usage for scale in order to flatten things, which is a typical workflow, let's say in Maya, Blender, or or anything. DSM, oh yeah, you guys want to check this out. This is cool. We won't go too deep into this. Let's turn that off, go to the cage. That's funny, I thought I was scaling vertical. DSM tools, dynamic shape modeling tools, they work extremely well inside of or with sub Ds, because you're only modifying the cage, the actual cage of the sub D. You can it works really good. So let's say, for example, we go to DSMs and lattice rig. If you guys aren't familiar with this, these are deformation tools. Some of them are pretty complex, like the transform rig, but the lattice is pretty straightforward. And we'll just make a few changes to this. Something like that. Yeah, we don't need to do anything. And I'll say done, and then I'll engage. And because the engagement, at least I hope, did I not? Yeah, there we go. So the engagement is modifying the rig, the actual cage, and which is running separately essentially from a smooth version. So the dynamic shape modeling tools work amazing for that. Although I'm not sure why this is running slow. There we go. Yeah. So the lattice is driving the cage is subdividing into the NURBS. And I hope I selected the right items, because this is running a little slow. I'm not sure. Usually it's lightning fast. But yeah, all the DSM tools, the dynamic shape modeling tools, work. Something's a little different from how I remembered. I should be able to go into this. Hey, my dog just came to join, if anybody heard a bark. soft organic shapes. Well, yeah, sub-Ds. Yeah, sub-Ds are lend itself to organic shapes quite naturally. You know, it's so interiors. Yeah, it should work really well for organic shapes inside of interiors. The thing about interiors, a lot of times the character lines are driving in all the little details, and that can add a lot of complexity to sub-D models. So if you go to the step or the level right before all the details with a sub-D model, you should get a lot of mileage out of it, and then use your regular NURBS tools for gaps and part lines and breaking up all the elements, and that might help control the density of the model. So for interiors specifically. So I don't have any examples though. Joe Mama, you're saying, yeah, a question, yeah, usually, it seems like the last time I was trying this, I haven't used this for production, but the updates were a lot faster, so I don't know if I've selected the wrong item or not. Usually it updates live, because, you know, I have performance options on during transform, so we should see that translation, but I don't know. I haven't tried it in a long time, so I'm not a expert on that. So, and then with the dynamic shape modeling tools, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to revert, and then it will. Yeah, something seems a little strange here. I don't know if you guys can see that on your end, but this isn't typically how it works. So I don't know. Maybe I'm in an older version or something that's not working, but. Dynamic shape modeling tools certainly do work, but for some reason I'm not even able to even revert. Cannot revert. Oh. That's probably going to break it. Oh well, that's fine. I'm not sure what happened there. That's one of those things where I've seen it work, I've used it, tried it, but I'm not very skilled with the transformer tools, dynamic shape modeling tools. So, good question though. I'm gonna have to play with that afterwards. I was expecting that to work a lot better. Oh yeah, no problem. Glad I can help. Aiden, do you have anything you specifically want to see? I really appreciate, your appreciation. So, let's just change some stuff. This is something that's pretty cool about these tools. I'm going to cut the car in half just so we can only look at half. Don't have to worry about this. One thing about wheels, especially, that let's remove a bunch of these options here, or the loops, and let's go ahead and remove that one as well, because we can always add those details in. I'll take this part off. I think, let me see if this is still connected. I might just delete all of these items. I left these attached just so I was working with one item, but for what I'm about to show you, I think it'll be best if we just delete them. So I'll just start splitting this apart, or take this little fang off. All right. Alright, and then I'm going to grab a face and add face loop just to split these guys. And then once I do that, now I should be able to pick these as separate object. There we go. So I just wanted to look at the wheel arch. Now, if we're looking at the wheel arch, I can see the center of the car. So another little trick or something that I do often is I'll use the dynamic section tool. Turn this on, turn the visual clipping on, and let's see if I can see where my little icon, and I'll just bring this out so that I'm hiding everything, and I'll just turn on persistent visual clip. Okay, and so now I can just look at the wheel arch, and I'm going to build a cylinder. You can do just a regular, oh, it's visually clipped. That's good. I'm like, where'd it go? And we'll scale. And if I actually had the wheel, that would be the best, but you know, just to offset. But that'll be close enough. And take that piece. And there's a super cool function here for aligning. And what we'll want to do, and I think you have to use the points. I could be wrong. You might be able to use the edges, but I'll just use the points. I'm going to go to Align Surface, Align to Surface, and then I'll grab the cylinder. And you can see it just snapped all of the cage points, the sub D points, to my cylinder. Now that's not driving the limit surface underneath, so you may still get areas where it doesn't follow the cylinder perfectly because it's actually the cage that's is driving that. But it's a quick way of fixing any of these crazy lines and Z shapes or S-ing that you may have in your cage, and especially around wheel arches. I'll just take this cylinder and put them in the wheels, and then I'm always kind of aligning to that so that I know I'm roughly in the ballpark. And then once you have the history, then I can adjust and do things like that. If you I might just hide this and call it wheel opening. Just a little smaller and place that there. And then I'll just keep it around. Now I know that all of those points are going to snap to that surface and remain nice rounded shape. So that's really cool. Cool. Yeah, that's cool. And then you can do it as well on some of these curves. Let me just find a little detail. Let's say, for example, well, here, let's turn off our dynamic section, turn off the persistence, exit, and let's find a character line that I want to mess with. And I'll delete a few of these loops so that simplify the model. Cool, delete. And I'll grab just a few of these guys. We could grab them all, do as many as we'd like. And I'll do the align to curve. And this time, what I'm going to do is generate a curve. And so now I have a curve, a simplified curve that all of those points are attached to. And instead of going in here and adjusting each individual sub D point and vertice, hold on a second, let me close the door. My baby's crying. All right. Okay, so now instead of adjusting all of those points individually, I'm using the curve, and this is a real simplified curve. I can add, some degrees. Let's just add another one. And control all of those points at once. So for exteriors where you're really trying to nail a character line, this is really helpful to be able to drive all of those points through a spline. Whatever you need to do. So those align to surface and align to curve tools, really important to drive that. And then if I don't like it, or I'm done, just delete the curve, and that's my new shape. So that's really cool. Oh, we've got a challenger. Oh, I'm weak. Wonderful. Awesome. So what's good for automotive polygon modeling, Blender or Maya? That's a great question. Maya is, well, it's an Autodesk product, so there's not much similarities between Maya and Autodesk, but at least the teams talk to each other. To go between Blender and Alias as far as transferring data, OBJ would probably be your best bet if you want sub Ds, but FBX, OBJ, or, well, those are probably the two main formats that you would use between the two. So for myself, I use Modo. I worked both for Autodesk for a long time, and then I worked for the Foundry, which creates Modo. So I became a Modo user. So I use Modo with Autodesk, or sorry, with Alias, and it's just what you get used to. Is really the best tool and the best workflow. That's my advice on that. If you know Blender or Maya, that's going to be your best tool. So awesome. So any other questions? Otherwise, I'll just kind of keep. Whoa. That's funny. Turned it off. And we can also talk about NURBS or any of the NURBS tools as well. Although the sub D is, what's new and exciting. So, yeah. Oh, actually, the question that you had about automotive polygon modeling, Blender or Maya, either one's going to be good. Just wanted to show example of exporting. There's a couple little nuances as far as export. So we can, if I just take the sub D model, and just remember the sub D is always producing limit surface below, and that limit surface is represented as a NURBS inside of Alias. So if we just do sub D to NURBS, these are all your NURBS patches now. Just standard NURBS patches all blended together. They're going to be different topology depending on the shapes and things like that. So if you just need NURBS out of the tool, no problem. You can get that. Now, if we want to go back or if we want to save polygons, I can do a few different things. Inside of the mesh tools, mesh, tessellation, sub D to mesh. Notice here that it's asking for sub D levels, and these levels are going to be similar, I would say similar, to how Maya handles the subdivision levels. So we'll just go with 3, the default, and I'll click go. And what I want you to look at or notice is even though this model is made up of individual NURBS patches, when the translation to mesh, it actually will go straight across the mesh or the patches and give you, it won't break up per patch to the NURBS. So for example, if I go here and I say NURBS to mesh, I believe this would be the alternative. And we look in, every patch, actually it did a pretty good job, but every patch is handled differently and a lot more density. So what you want to use is the NURBS to mesh, and then it will go right across all of the patches, as opposed to, and I think, each individual mesh, there you go, is an individual patch, and those would all need to be merged. So that's just something to keep in mind when going, from Alias, trying to get polygons to, a rendering program or something like that may not bring NURBS in by default. I don't believe Modo, unless you have a plugin, Modo won't accept NURBS as an import. So you would have to convert to mesh, send it to Modo, and then render, animate, do whatever you need to do in that package. So always a little nuanced, little detail. Cinema 4D shortcuts. Do you have an example of some of those shortcuts? So, and while you post those, like rotation and reset view, Alias's hotkeys, basically everything can be hotkey. So for example, the rotation tools would be found under Palette, Transform, Move, Rotate, Scale, Transform. This here, so I'll just set that to Q, which is like your Maya hotkey, the QWERTY keys for transforms. And setting that to Q, I'll apply. Notice I have toggle single hotkeys on. I'm making the switch to single hotkeys inside of Alias. And if I have an object and I hit Q now, let's see, did that work? Yep. So I get this manipulator, right? And, oh, the history from the, hold on one second. That's funny. I didn't realize I still had history on. Yeah, so this manipulator is similar to what you would see inside of Maya. I'm assuming Cinema 4D has something similar. And that manipulator can be found here. So it can be switched to just move, just rotate, or scale. And if you wanted to set this up, let's just say for Maya, I'll just create a new shelf. Let's see, new shelf, hotkeys. Maybe I have a shelf that is the only purpose is to store hotkeys. And then I'll just take one with all of them turned on. So there's the transform. I believe if you hold down, hold down Control, drag again, and it will duplicate that icon. And now I could switch these to the individual. So there's like rotate, right? And let's go ahead and I'll just rename this rotate. And now inside of your hotkeys, oh, I still had that open, which is awesome. Inside of the hotkeys under shelf, hotkeys, I could rename, oh, I renamed the wrong one, but I could make this, what's rotate? I think it's E inside of Maya. And so now I can get an object. Let me just delete the construction history. And I'll just hit E, and now I get the rotation manipulator. Right? So you do have to do a few steps in order to get similar functionality, at least with Maya, and I'm assuming Cinema 4D is similar, but yeah, so you just hotkey the actual shelf button with all of the settings that you would like. And then if you want to hotkey just your standard rotate here, that doesn't give you the manipulator, you certainly can do that. That's not a problem. So hope that helps for hotkeying. And then another, actually something that I've always wanted to show people, because this isn't very well known. So I've got my preferences, and notice these two tools have the same icon, and one's set up right now for kind of a multi-purpose transform. The other one is rotate. If I hold, and I think it's Shift and Alt, or sorry, Control and Alt, and I double click with my left click, it will generate an icon file. And let's see, am I able to save that? Doesn't look like it. So it generates this icon, and it's a TIFF format. And so I'll just go, and just to get there, I'm going to say, I'm on another screen. Give me 1 second. I'll drag this over. There we go. And let's go up one level. And under bitmaps, small, because I'm in the small, you can see I've got other bitmaps. Where did it put that one? Oh, that's strange that it's not showing it. But you can see that I have custom icons, and then you just go into Photoshop and modify them and save it. So you could convert these icons so you can see it visually, that one's rotate, one's transform, one's move, or scale, or something like that. So I'm not sure why it didn't. Let me just try that again. Where did it say? Oh, I see. Expanded preference set. Okay, because I'm using a custom preference set. So let's just go there. Alias 21, expanded preference set. Here we go. Bitmaps, small, and there's the icon. And so that, just open up in Photoshop, modify it, save it, and then every time you launch Alias, it will have a custom icon. And so doesn't look like it loaded any of the ones that I have custom for this particular setup without restarting. So usually I have my two extends have different icons so I can visually tell them apart. So all right, can you create a class A? I've always wanted to do this. All right, so yeah, lose control of an object, and I want to reset the view. So setting the view, there's a couple ways of doing that. That's a good question. So the first one is look at. So under view, look at, Alt-L, and it will center anything that I have selected. So if I have those CVs selected, I can bring that in and get right to the view of that. And then I believe you can reset view, which will change your camera stuff. And I thought there was a way to set the home view. So above the icon over here is the home, and set view as home. So that would be kind of an overall. Let's say you have this is your favorite view. Click here, set current view as home. And now anytime I want, I just click on the home button and it will take me to that view. And so that would be another way of kind of setting that up. So good question. The icon trick is cool. Yeah, for sure. It's really, it's awesome. Yeah, there's duplicating. There's just one other one, if you like the icon. Another one is middle mouse button drag. You get the red arrow, and you can create drop downs. So be able to pile all of your icons on top of each other, which is cool because that's how I run my edit point curves inside of my shelf, things like that. And that also works for marking menus. So just kind of touching upon this, let's say I'll just drag this whole group. What is this? My right mouse button. Okay. So now if I go here, it will have a pop-up window with all my icons listed from my marking menu. So I've seen people put several variations of, let's say like your surfacing tools in a quick one icon, and then when you click on it, it expands to this little mini shelf that you can select different icons from your marking menus or wherever you'd like. So yeah, Blender and Maya, we talked a little bit about that earlier. Whatever tools that Maya has a ton of both packages have a ton of resources online, so they're going to be pretty much whatever is going to be the best tool. So cool. Any other questions? Let me just see. Can you create a Class A surface using sub D? That's a good question. Let's, we can get into a massive debate about Class A. So let's define Class A first. And in my mind, Class A just means meeting the standard of whatever the manufacturing requirements are. And that could be an engineering requirement, it could be an aesthetic requirement, it could be a tooling requirement. Often when I'm doing Class A, I'm looking at the flow of the CVs so that fundamentals of the actual NURBS model is good and precise, and it's very logical the way that it's laid out. But it also takes into account any draft requirements, minimum radiuses, pedestrian protection, head, knee impact, things like that. And that's how I define Class A. So it's pretty loose. So in that sense, if you were able to build a sub-D model that satisfied those requirements, and maybe the radiuses are being defined with the surface fillet tool, maybe the drafts, you're just kind of building those into the model, there is nothing that's preventing you from taking this to tooling. It is a NURBS patch. It is NURBS model. The flow, each patch has continuity, and because of the nature of all these points, you can see that sometimes you get little waves, but if you were able to master the model so that you don't get those, this is all isophytes. Whoops, let's see. Turn this on. This is just a fairly mathematical way of representing the continuity. That's, for all practical purposes, it's a NURBS. So you can machine it, and you're not going to get facets and things like that. So if it satisfied those requirements, there's no reason you couldn't use this. I was looking at carbon fiber bike frames for this tool. And it's really interesting, a lot of carbon fiber bike frames, they're fairly organic, and the transitions from one shape to the next are fluid, we'll call them. But yet you have to have very precise interfaces with all of the insets and the metal components that would get bonded together to form the bike frame and parts. And being able to combine sub-D, super fluid organic shape modeling, and for like the headset and seat post and all that, you could use a mechanical NURBS model intersected with the sub-Ds to satisfy those very mechanical, precise parts. So there's, especially with Alias, there's no reason that you couldn't go into manufacturing or into production with a sub-D model for something like a carbon frame or anything like that. So that's a really good example of where you could take it. Automotive reflections are king, so NURBS really does lend itself to that. So. ISO angle shader. Oh God. Let's see what I can do. Thanks, Joe Mama, putting me on the spot. That ISO angle. The question was, can you explain the ISO angle shader? And this explanation, by no means am I an expert or understand the true mathematics of it, but in general, if we look at just your zebra stripes, right? The zebra stripes inside of Alias is essentially you have a black and white, hold on, piece of paper, and it's strapped to your head, and you're looking through the paper. The camera is looking through this paper. And so the zebra stripes are just essentially reflecting a black and white panel that's sitting on the camera, basically on your face. So it's not mathematically, it's not really taking in a bounce of a light or a reflection and calculating it in that form. So ISO angle, let's actually go to this version and see. Right now I've got it set. We'll switch this to single. Yeah, that will be fine. And so ISO angle is taking, let's hide all my stuff. So it's skimming across at a specific angle across the geometry to generate the actual reflection. So it's a mathematical kind of bounce back, a point that it skims the, is tangent to the surface to generate the actual reflection. And so when we add multiple, it's basically just spanning, I believe, making more of an array of these angles at this and giving you a mathematic point exactly where it meets those angles and that. So ISO angle tends to be, or is, I should say, a more accurate representation of how reflections actually will bounce off of your surface from a given angle, and or from a given light source, for example. So even though you can make it look, or you can have a similar readout as the zebra stripes, notice when I'm rotating around, it's fixed because it is based off this manipulator's angle. So I use iso angle in the absolute most rudimentary way of basically X, Y, and Z, and yeah, I'll read continuity from that, but I don't really get into, fully driving all of this stuff. And keep in mind, I don't do very many super class A exteriors of cars, which is where this is most applicable. So, hope that helps, Jemama. I know you have a development background, so you probably actually know more about it than I do. So, but yeah, great question though. Just a quick, from a mathematical standpoint, iso angle, tunnel is taking actually these strips of light and reflecting it onto the surface, and because the strips are fixed and we're tumbling around and it's reflecting back into the camera, this would be more of a mathematical representation, as well as sofats. I don't even know how to say that. Again, this is a mathematical option. And then, from just graphics, obviously any of your showroom reflection, the classic sky, zebra stripes, those are not mathematical per se. They're more of a visual representation of what it might look like. So, make you on my schedule every day. Oh man, thank you. I would love to do this. Let's see if we can do, maybe I can crank out one tomorrow as well. That'd be awesome. Show an example of Class A surface been generated from sub D. I have not done that. I'm learning the sub D tools myself. I had the honor that I got to work with some of the Autodesk folks to really learn the sub D tools directly from them and have interactions with why tools are built the way they are. So I'm really getting my head wrapped around all the sub D tools. Some things though that I would check, for example, this model, and I'll point out some areas that make it not Class A, and then maybe you can see where you can improve this. So for example, let's do this rear. This is intended that these would actually be separated, and the top shell, clamshell for this would be one part, and then the rear fascia would be another. But let's go ahead and check it out. First thing, want to make sure all of our normals are pointing in the right direction. Sub Ds, they're always going to be consistent with the normal. My first check from Class A, from a molding and I see. Would be draft analysis, and for coming in Y, I don't want negative. Well, actually, it would be X. So for draft analysis, I almost always build a vector, but I can tell you just from the rear of the car, this would be a negative. You want the vector to point away from your object. So if you have a tool, let me see, where's my camera? If you have your part here and you have a tool, the vector would point in the direction the tool is going to slide away from the part. And if we were checking for, say, 3 degrees of draft from this section here, so all of these parts in sub D, where you see red, and all under here, those would all need to get an angle so that you could actually pull this out of even a fiberglass tool for this part. Fiberglass, you'd probably want to get 3 degrees as a minimum for all draft angles, all of your flanges and things like that. So to fix this would simply, I would probably, I would probably go in here and just delete a few of these loops. Oh, whoops. Didn't have that turned on. And we'll delete that. And then I would grab, basically, I would probably use my CV transform tool. And I'm just going to grab some of these so that we see a difference here. And I'm going to just go around. I won't grab them all. Yeah, we'll just get these guys, these ones here. And I'm going to go to the CV transform or transform CV. Also found down here on my control panel. And I'm going to go to normal. And let's shade this. And we're going to, oh, I was hoping they would all move in the same direction. I'd probably have to let's unselect some of these guys. Oh, and I'll show you one other feature of selection that is going to be helpful for this. Let's do, yeah. But, okay, well, you'll see. This section, they're all moving in different directions than the normal. I wish that didn't work that way, but I guess it did. So we would want to make sure that it lit up blue, and that tells us that we at least have 3 degrees of draft on that part. So that would be my first check for this part to see if it's Class A. You know, if it met all of the aesthetic requirements. Now we're looking at, you know, the tooling requirements. The next one that I would check, I'll use the curve evaluation tool. And down here, minimum, or first of all, set it to principal max, minimum radius. And for minimum radius, this is a composite part, right? So for fiberglass, let's say it's carbon fiber. Carbon fiber will have 1.5 mils, a couple mils, you know, let's just say 2 mils of material. And so our minimum radius couldn't be any smaller than 2 mils, and most likely it would have to be 2.5 to 3. Pedestrian protection could drive the dimension as well. And, you know, there's a whole slew of reasons you have to be above a certain minimum radius. And in this case, it's set to 5, which is fine just for our example. And you can see anywhere that it's this pink color, that means the surface is below that minimum radius, and you would potentially get air bubbles in those sections for composites. It could drive, you know, where the fabric or the mat, you know, vacuum bag or whatever technique you're using, you know, might not be able to get the mesh in there or the material in there because your radius is smaller than the thickness of the fabric or the cloth. And so, you know, you'd end up getting just resin in the corners. You could also, there are some scenarios that you'll get paint requirements. So like a lot of small plastic parts, you know, you might have a 0.5 mil minimum required for a radius. Maybe it's slightly larger in order for paint to stick, so it's not a sharp edge. And, you know, so that would help, again, take it to confirm it's Class A, using that term sort of somewhat loosely in this model. And so that would be my next check, minimum radius. And all of these areas in this particular model would have to be adjusted. And then, yeah, and then at the end of the day, if you satisfy those 2 parts, at least you will be able to get it out of a tool, and you'll be able to do the cloth layup to build the part and paint it. So, hope that helps, you know, of what would make it Class A. So, let me just catch up on the chat here for a second. You know, edit the looks of your view cube. Cool. Great. If you can show example of Class A generated from sub D. Kind of just went through that. Couldn't figure out how do you change shelf icons again. So, great question. Control and Alt. Double left mouse click. And that will save an icon in your folder, and just look at the path. This is my path. And you modify the TIFF image in Photoshop. Save it. Don't change the name. It has to have the exact same name. Save it. You know, relaunch Alias. You know, close it if it was still open. Relaunch it, and when it relaunches, it should load your custom icon in place of the original one. And I could always do that. Here, let's So like, for example, this is a good one. The custom icon stuff is pretty important. So I have two extends. I'm going to modify this one, and this one is expanded small with that name. All right. So I'm just going to use my export just to shortcut getting here. Well, first of all, I'm going to grab my bitmaps, small, and this is my custom icon for extend. Expanded preferences. Here, I have another one, and there's the one I just generated from that by clicking the Control and Alt with left click. I'll paste. And right now it's number 44. So I'll just take that, just delete, rename, 44. Cross fingers that this works. And here I'll just save preferences just to make sure we are using the same ones. Okay, exit. That's weird. How fun. Yeah, so Maya would probably be the standard, but really it's whatever you know. I know a lot of people that use every application out there. So. That's amazing. I'm not sure what's causing that. I'm going to just, you guys are free to see this. See if I can fix it. I'm going to pull this over here. Roaming. Autodesk Alias. Ignore those other things. So that, let's see if it is the preference. Let's hide that. Defaults. Huh. That's very strange. I'm not sure why that caused a crash, but I renamed the old preferences and then I'll just reload them and see what happens, but that's very bizarre. Cool. Good questions. So I'm going to get going soon, guys. Thanks for joining. Any last questions that I can answer? And we will try to do this more often. And I'll most likely delete this part of the video off of the original. So sad. Oh, poor. Let's see. Import preference set. Let me hide this so there's nothing. Any questions? And I will try to do these more often. Yeah, because I really enjoy them. It's a lot of fun. Yes, I will not delete the live videos. They'll be up. Cool. Any last minute questions before I sign off? Actually, I see one question here about using a sub-D surface as the base, and I don't know if that's possible. I don't think so. I don't believe so. I'm going to go with that. So yeah, I don't know if you can use a NURBS as the sub-D base. But sub-D is a NURBS, if that makes sense. So hopefully that was clear. So great video on vanishing feature. Yeah, I will. I can do that. That would be awesome. Actually, here, let me just show you a real quick little trick. I don't know what type of feature you're looking for, but one of my kind of go-to formulas for that. Let's just make this a little bigger. And so if I'm trying to wash like a character line out, let me get rid of my grids. And what I'll do, and I'm just going to hack this. Where's my shelf? I run off shelves. go to my laptop. So wherever you want your feature to disappear, like if we're talking about a character line, depending on it, and so let's say, let me just bring this a little further down. So I want my character line to wash out at this point. That's like your furthest point possible that you're going to wash it out. And then I'm just detaching, but it would be the exact same for any method that you're using to build this. So these could be, bi-rails or squares or freeform blends, whatever you want. What I'm going to do here is I'll pick up, I'll grab this one, and let's add some more detail. There we go. And so I've added a few. If I want this to wash out curvature, that means I'm not going to move these 3 rows of CVs. And I could bunch these up further down here, depending on the shape that I'm going for. But usually I keep most of my CVs fairly uniform spacing. And I'm going to grab this one. We'll go to our CV move tool. I'm using the transform feature. And so let's set this back to 1. And I'll just go up in Z. Let me turn the sensitivity down, right? So I move the one CV, it falls off in all directions, and then I'm able to adjust this. So I can get like a nice blend, something like that. And we'll just pull that down just a little bit. Now if I wanted that to be consistent, I could just copy paste and do a mirror and patch those together. Let's try something real quick. This is a little, maybe you guys will pick something up. I'm going to align just with positional, and it only moved that first row. But if I add blending and I add in 2 more rows, so now it's taking this point, whatever the transform, the amount of movement, the distance, and basically blending it out. And I can use the slider to control, and I'm going to use my Alt key and make this by using the Alt key in any input, text input, I can make it a slider. And so just by using the blend control inside of the align, I can get something that's kind of similar, And so I'll do this for a number of reasons, like, if I'm building a character line or a hood, or like if I'm doing like a power dome on a hood and I want it to go across the center line, I'll just set this to 0. I'll add in another row, and then it takes the same shape that it was and makes all of those align with this positional shape. So, that's just some cool little tricks that you can do to get that. And so fundamentally what we have here is a positional change, character line. This could be, real subtle, real, bold like this. I have a patch that they blend into where they terminate. And then I'll just use surface fillet. And you'll want to set it to chordal. And if you guys, does everybody know the difference between radius and chord construction type? If you could just give me some feedback in the chat, that would be great. We could cover that real quick too. Whoops. Oh, did I miss that one? Edge line, edge line. Let's turn off Bezier, see what we can do with. Just curious. Although that one may have failed, or well, that's close enough because it's perfect. And so, basically all of everything I blend out will look something like that. And they'll flow right into this. And when you see max curve deviation 1, that just means that it's reached its maximum arc length for the analysis, which I believe is 255 or 250 some thousand. I think it's 1,000 radius, which is essentially flat. So that's just telling you that the input surfaces are flat, by all means. So, oh, you don't. Okay, so let me just, I'll mock this up. Let me just, I'll draw it. It might be easier. Yeah, I'm going to draw with my mouse. Okay, so you have a corner. Radius is the dimension here, right? So that would be your radius amount on for a fillet. You can also, so with chordal, instead of measuring in this direction out to come up with the center of the fillet, what chordal says is it measures, there's two options. There's chordal length, which says, give me a dimension from here to this point, measure that, and we'll call that CL, chordal length. And that tells, so you have, let's say, 20 millimeters, so that would be 20 millimeters, and then the radius is whatever it ends up. So you're not really specifying the center radius of this, although there are inputs that you can change that. There's also tangent, chordal tangent or tangent length, and that dimension is measuring from the theoretical intersection to the tangent line, and that would be tangent length. And so that remains a consistent number. And where that's really important, and it's a concept that you really gotta kind of perfect, is, let's just use a cube, and yeah, we'll just set this one to 1 by 1. Okay, and so we'll open this up and we'll drop that. So we have now an intersection, kind of like what we have here, that's going from an acute angle to an obtuse angle. And if we set the surface fillet to radius, and we'll just give that some size, notice that, let's make it a little smaller, might be able to see it a little better. Notice it's pinching. So the closer this angle is, the tighter the radius is, or the tighter the size of the fillet is. And you'll tend to feel like you can see this in your fillet. It looks more like a variable, even though dimensionally, if we were to measure the center radius, we're going to have 5 millimeters of center radius, right? So radius, even though it gives us a nice shape of the fillet, especially for tangent, will give us a perfect arc, it ends up giving you variable tangent lines. Whereas if I switch to chordal and I switch to something like tangent length, which is 5, now you can see, let's turn off my continuity check. Now you can see that the dimension, the size of it, is going to be more consistent. And especially if I do chordal length, which is again measuring the distance from that point to this point, that point has to be the same from there to there, and you'll get nice uniform fillets. And so, and then you can set the minimum radius here, which will try to achieve a dimensional radius. And where that's important on this particular example is as these surfaces come to a curvature where they're completely smooth and flush, if I switch this to radius, it will probably fail, first of all. But you'll see that it pinches to a point. Oh, and yeah, total failure, because it always wants to have an angle. It can't be 180 degrees. Whereas if I switch this to chordal, we can get away with that at a 100-degree angle, and it's just going to put a little strip of surface in that area. And sometimes, sometimes it won't even resolve. It will just end like here, and then you have to manually finish off the washout of this feature. But mechanically, and the way I approach almost every sort of situation when I want to wash it out, it's some mashup of these rules. So I hope that that helped as far as washing things out. I always love showing people those simple elements. Vanishing feature. Yeah. Using common patch. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, the common patch. It doesn't have to be, but it makes it simple. It's going to be fluid going into that patch and very controlled, all on the same edge, theoretical edge. So awesome. 45 degrees. What do you mean by that? Or 21 in numbers? Just curious. Said 17. Work with history? Yes, I use history a lot. Although these days, because I don't use curves a lot. In my work, I'll use curves to build initial patches, but I almost always direct model. As you can see here, I moved the CVs in order to create this shape, as opposed to laying out curves and dealing with bi-rails or squares and things like that. So I'm much more likely just to build a patch, delete the curves, and then hand model, sculpt all of the CVs. And when you hand sculpt, a lot of times you're deleting the history on that. But for this situation, because I'm just blending between these two, I'll leave the history of the fillet, and that way, if I want to make, a change, let's just go through here and adjust this one. I can move that up and then have it update and give me that feedback. So I use history on a lot of things, but I have a hotkey to delete locators, which is pretty much all of my tools display continuity. You'll see those C's and T's and all that. I like to know whether something achieved the target continuity, and then I'll delete history after a while, which is Shift S on my keyboard, just because I'm always coming in and out of the history. Good question. Sub D corner layout. What type of corner? If you could elaborate on that. How to make the fillets from up to down. Oh, wow. Yeah, those are, you're saying from invert, from a positive fillet to a negative, said 17? I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. I wish this was a two-way. We should do like a Zoom meeting on this so we could all interject and you guys could verbally abuse me. From sharp to smooth. Yeah, like if this was a sharp edge down here and we had to have a fillet, is that what you're referring to? And I can keep going, guys. I'm not tied to jumping off anytime soon. So if you guys want to keep asking questions, by all means. Oh, here's something that I think's cool, and it looks like it's turned off. I would just copy paste from a sharp fillet to a smooth fillet. Is that what you're referring to? Yes. Okay. I could show you. Well, that I'll show you kind of what at least what I think I'm interpreting from that. So I want to pick this surface and this, and I want a variation just to one side. So I could copy paste, Control C, Control V. Typically, I have my paste set to always ask and I hit go, and it comes up with these pasting options. And so I can create from here, I can say new layer, and I could put, V2, and then it will take those new parts that I'm pasting and drop it into a layer automatically. And pretty much run with those options always on, so that I can make really control my layers and stuff like that. So the question about, let me just retrim that one. Yeah, so it would be kind of to go from a sharp to well, first of all, really nothing in design is perfectly sharp. There's usually some sort of fillet on it, so we could go from a small fillet to a large fillet. But depending on where you want the sharpness, I could either wash the fillet out larger, say like a variable radius, so that we have one down here, and I can just switch this to variable, right? And now if I grab the outer, whoops, not that one, just this edge, I can drag this piece wherever I want, and I could add in another one down here, and this one that I dragged out, this, I could grab this center arch one and adjust that. And so, I could make it variable in that format if that helps. Otherwise, if I needed it perfectly sharp to something smooth, I would just, on top of my fillet, I would model this type of shape where I'd model in that sharpness and then just let it fade out into the fillet, and then the fillet picks up, continues that smoothness down to the far side. So I think I hope I answered that. It's always tough to interpret off the chat room, or the live chat. Multiple faces to one. Good question. Let me see an example that I could come up with. Let's import sub D. We were looking at some sub D stuff earlier, so I'm just going to grab that file. And I'm importing a sub D OBJ. And I know that I had to rotate, and I believe it was 90. There we go. World's smallest car. So let's look at the box modeling. So a situation like this, Saharda, I think is the way you would pronounce that. Sorry if I screwed up your name. Is this what you're referring to? These types of patches where I'm taking 3 and basically getting into 2? Oh yeah, I should do this on Twitch. You're not the first to suggest that. Are you guys all part of Twitch? Or follow Twitch stuff often? Yeah, I really should do that. Good call. Let me just show you a few tricks here that we could do. And let's see, let me just find an area. I see a couple of them. Yeah, let me grab these guys. Oh, I wish I had my hotkey set up. All right, so I'm just doing that, and then I'm going to insert through here. Whoops. I always say whoops because insert has parallel or perpendicular. So I'm going to do perpendicular, then I'll cut from here. Guess I didn't snap. Uh-oh. Give it 1 second. I can hear the fans kicking on. I'm just on a laptop, and it doesn't seem to like dealing with some of these sub Ds. All right, so So we have this piece through here, and then I'm just going to add a few loops. So we'll insert. And so a lot of times, you know, I'm always trying to get to quads. And instead of having all of these edges cut through here, you know, maybe I needed some extra geometry or topology in this corner, but I would need it to fade away. And what you would do to go from 3 down to 1 is I would cut, and I would cut from here to here. Something's really slow. Well, here, I'll just move it down because I don't know why that didn't snap. Let me just exit out of this. Maybe that's... So I'm going to... Wow, even my shading's slow. Let's go Alt-L. Let's find out where I'm at. There we go. So I'm going to cut a little triangle piece or in that area. And you can see that it automatically, when it went into the smooth shading, that it divided it quite a bit. And you'll get a lot of funkiness in that area. And so what you want to do, there we go, is take these, and I'm going to select this outer loop and this one and delete. And then I'm going to take this edge and I'm going to delete that one. And so now you basically have two quads. This looks like a triangle, but because there's a vertice on this edge, there's actually 4 sides. And now when we, let me turn up my quality settings. Just want to come here and there we go. And you can see that the way it divided it makes it look like this little spear shape. And so there's a lot of techniques or several techniques to be able to manage kind of the ability to reduce down to single edges or from 3, things like that. So I don't know if that was what you're referring to on the corners. Otherwise, you know, a lot of my corners, I try to keep quads, like in this situation or area, you know, where it just flows around. This is an interesting breakup here because I've got basically some hold edges that I want to flow. And then I have a patch right here in the middle that basically breaks this so that this can loop all the way around to give you that shape. I'm trying to find a corner. Yeah, here's another example of, you know what guys, I just realized this. Usually I work with, you can go to anti-aliasing, and instead of 1 and 1.5, I'm going to do 1 and 2. I'm going to hit go. Now it'll make all my lines a little thicker, a lot easier to see. And then I'll go to draw style. And my sub Ds, okay. So now they're circles. So, yeah, so here's an area I've got this center break. It drops down into this type of patch 4, and then it comes across what would be the backlight, and easy way to reduce that. So, cool. Awesome. Whole number and variable. Can you make value as a whole number and variable fillets rather than dragging? Sorry I missed that question earlier. Yes, you can. So let me just switch back to that. So I'll just grab it. We're just gonna, a really awesome cube. Hide everything else. Oops, turn this off. So variable, surface fillet. Let's give it our little bit more size. There we go. Variable. So if I have this selected up here, I can just type in a number. So now it's 30. And then when I set it here, and couple little nuances. This is something, if you're using variable a lot, you should check this out. So if I have this part of the arc on this portion of the variable selected, I can key in a number and then it will build it. So the prompt line is basically always waiting for whatever you have selected for input. And because I have single hotkey selected right here, I have to hit tab in order to highlight the prompt line to engage it, and then I can type. So 10. So that's how you would activate that with or type it in as opposed to dragging. Something that a lot of people don't know, or they might not think about offhand, is the fact that if the variable is edge to edge all the way from one end to the next, it's a linear transition for the fillet. But if I simply select the handle, oh gosh, that's funny. Select the handle, switch that to 10. There we go. If I come off the edge just a little bit, so I'm grabbing this. Maybe I have to do it with my middle mouse button. Okay, middle mouse button. And I just come slightly off the edge. It's going to transition tangency out. And so if I pulled this one, why do I keep doing that? Trying to select it. There we go. And I pull that one. You can see that now on both sides it exits tangent to the edge. So if you simply just grab the manipulator and instead of having it at 0, you just a little bit, it gives you this flow with your variable fillets. And then if I go all the way, it's linear, the way it exits. So hope that that little nuance, hope that helped and you're able to see that. Sub D, so for me, I've known about sub Ds. Whenever Alias comes out, I try to look through the what's new and I go through all of the functionality and try to at least understand how I can apply it to my own workflow. Unfortunately, when 2020 or 2019, whenever they introduced sub Ds, I was involved. This past year has been the busiest I've ever been with Alias. It's unfortunate we're all in this pandemic right now because I was turning down work at an incredible rate, and which is good, not bragging or anything. I'm just saying I was so busy on Class A and concept models that I did not have time to even explore how I could implement sub Ds. And so fast forward ahead to this year, this past winter or early spring, I spent basically a month only modeling sub Ds and started applying some of the tools and techniques that I use inside of Modo to Alias. And now I'm comfortable to at least understand where the barriers between the two technologies are. And the fact that sub Ds always produces NURBS, and I can use my NURBS tools and workflows with the sub D model, really makes it interesting that you can just explore so freely. And so certain things, I'm definitely going to attempt to use sub Ds more, but I haven't really figured out how, if somebody's asking me for a Class A project, it's going to be all basically NURBS. If somebody is asking me for a concept model, I might do a version of it in sub Ds to get the initial sign off, but a lot of them want to have something I can hand off. So it may require the industry to adapt a little bit. And then for my own workflow, I'll probably use sub Ds a lot more for exploration and just design intent type of models. So, and then I'll slowly transition between the two. You did miss my earlier talk, potentially. you know, I was looking at some products like carbon fiber bike frames where it would absolutely make sense to do a lot of that in sub Ds and in combination with NURBS engineering data, and yeah, and work it that way. So one thing real quick, just to show something in sub Ds. Let's just build a curve. Here, I'm gonna start the curve here, and that way it's. I still like using 1 degree curves for my sub Ds. I think they give me a lot more control that I like. And I will extrude, switch this to normal, and pull out a sub D. And I'll do it again. Okay. And this is the stuff that I think is really interesting, and I believe I can do it. Never done this live before, so yeah, we'll see how it works out. So I've got this model, right? And right now, let's say this is a wheel arch, and that is sub Ds. Let's say I have a body side, and that could be any shape that I want, and that's fine. And I'm going to, I just want to see if I can do this with the irregular align tool. Okay, so I can do it that way. So you can take surface. I'm going to use this align. Oh, no. It is this one. Let me just try this real quick. Let me see what happens. So I'm going to align to there. So did I break that? That's the question. I did not. Can I add more geometry? I don't know if you guys see what I'm doing here, but I have a sub D cage, and then I'm using the align tool in project in Y with curvature. And so, you know, this is where I'm exploring at the moment, is how can you really manipulate these features? You know, I've got a sub D cage that I'm aligning the limit surface to another patch. And, you know, and there's some things that aren't working so awesome here. And that's just mainly because I don't know where the limits are. And I don't know how to truly control this. But these are the things that I find very interesting, is how can I start combining my NURBS workflows with sub D parts, where I can concept model really fast in sub Ds and blend that to geometry that's NURBS. And are these set to normal, or, oh, there we go. That's what I wanted, not normal. I want to set this to Y. You know, I find that's really interesting. And there's got to be this kind of nice hybrid where you can model sub D, half NURBS, align, and really figure out where those borders, those boundaries of the two technologies or two methodologies are. Because yeah, and that's where it's getting very interesting. And so I haven't seen other people really explore and push the boundaries of, you know, hybrid modeling between the two. And you know, hopefully I can start kind of figuring that out and get a read of how we can really take advantage of this technology, this stuff, and make it do what we want it to do. You know, because at the end of the day, you know, that's what Alias is about, is not letting the software drive you, but you really take control and drive the software. But I think that's really cool. You know, that this is a NURBS patch. This is a sub D cage. Whoops, I don't want to move that. And the sub D cage is aligning, the limit surface of the sub D is aligning to the body. Like, that's really cool. And yeah, so I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I think that's pretty neat. Do you use planarized hull or smooth option? I do. For both NURBS and sub-Ds, I do use planarized hull, and I don't use smooth. Smooth here under Object Edit. I do not use smooth at all, but I may in the future. I've been experimenting with smooth, and yeah, so good questions, great questions. So this was a lot of fun, guys. I hope you guys found something useful, and yeah, I'll try to do this on a more regular basis. I love it. This is a lot of fun and keeps me working on Alias, and I hope you guys are working on it as well, and everyone's safe, healthy, and continuing to push the boundaries of surfacing. As always, keep surfing. Peace. Later.